In this video, we'll learn how to identify the different components of the phone, of the motherboard, such as the antenna, resistors, inductors, integrated chips, and things like that. Here we have a Samsung S5, and so we'll look at the back of this. And here you see that the motherboard is actually protected, and it's covered here. So in order to get to the motherboard, we actually have to take off the LCD screen to get to the motherboard. Okay, so if we take the screen off, so this is after several minutes of removing the screen, then we see part of the board here, and this is where the power supply comes in. So okay, here is the where the power supply connects to. Right, and here, and then we have to remove this part in order to get to the motherboard. Again, this is the Samsung S5. So after disassembling this part, we'll see the motherboard. Alright, so here we see a few things. Here, this is the camera. We see here the flash is over here, and this is where the SIM card goes into the slot. This is where the memory card goes. And then actually let's look at this flex board. This is flexible. It's usually called a printed circuit board, a PCB, and this is a flexible PCB. Okay, so if we actually zoom in closer, we can see the different components of this flex PCB. Alright, so let's zoom in just a little bit closer, and then we see a bunch of components. We see a lot of these rectangular components here. These rectangular components can be resistors, inductors, or capacitors. And you have different colors. You have brown, light brown, gray, and then we see these black rectangular components. These black rectangular components are called diodes. And the circuit symbol for diodes is this triangular shape with a vertical bar. So if we zoom in a little bit closer, you can see this a little bit better. So these are called diodes, and the diodes represent this black rectangular component. So here we have these rectangular components here. So the purpose of a diode is to allow current to flow in only one direction. So in the direction of the arrow. So current can only flow into the left for this case. And for this diode, the current can only flow to the right. Diodes are used in many different applications, such as solar cells, photodiodes, applications like that. Also for power management. Okay, and these other components here represent inductors, capacitors, or resistors. It's hard to tell just from this whether it's a resistor, capacitor, or inductor. And so when you're soldering the components, then you'll know. Also, there is a layout for any PCB. There's a layout, and on the layout it'll indicate L, C, or R to indicate if it's inductor, capacitor, or resistor. So these are some of the components on the flex PCB board. Okay, and here we see a black rectangular component here. This is the chip, one of the many chips on this Samsung S5. And inside the chip, there are many, in some cases, millions of transistors. In other cases, maybe thousands, hundreds of thousands, depending on the complexity of the chip. Here, you can actually identify another diode. First, you see this circuit symbol for the diode. So if we zoom in a little bit closer here, we can see the rectangular black block over here, which is the diode, and this is the circuit symbol. Again, we have more passive components. Resistors, inductors, and capacitors are considered passive components because it doesn't require a power for it to work, for it to operate. However, these chips require a power supply for it to operate. And so transistors are called active components. Diodes are also called considered active components. Okay, next let's look inside the board here. In previous models, the back of the motherboard of the smartphones weren't protected in the previous Samsung versions, but because in order to for there to be no modification, for people could take off components, or something could happen to the motherboard. So in order to protect it, we have this gray cover. So after disassembling this, we can actually get to the motherboard over here.